so much I want to share today. We're going to have kind of like a personal conversation, but of course all applies. But I just wanted to share a little bit about the journey that I went on, or am on, I guess, still doing it, with breastfeeding, because I feel like it is so relevant to business. And I feel like there is just so many gems in that. And I've been thinking about this so much. And I actually tried to write a couple posts about it because I wanted to share about it. And they just got super, super long. So I was like, fuck, this is probably a live stream. So here we are. And if you're here and listening to this, thank you. Because obviously, quite a personal story, or most of it, but I definitely think there are just so many parallels here. So if you're here and you make any kind of comment, just as a way to say thank you, we're giving away the Million Her bundle today. So anyone that just gives us a comment, spends time with us today, entered to win for that. But yeah, so let's dive in. So basically the reason I called it my journey in underperforming is because I have been like basically underperforming at breastfeeding since day one. And I want to preface this by saying this is not like a belief that I hold that I like feel is negative. It's just like factually true. Like I don't produce enough milk for Bennett. So anyway, like I'm not beating myself up about it. We will have that conversation, but underperforming is technically like a factually true thing here. And I think that's the reason I wanted to say that too, is because I think that can feel factually true in business, and there can still be other pieces and things to look at. And so wanting to just like name that and share that, like I'm not necessarily like harboring all of these like terrible feelings about it, but the reality is like I produce half or less like than what he needs. And so technically like underperforming is true. And I think it's kind of okay to say that. Hey, Belinda. And I think sometimes it's like healing to be able to say that too. Like even in business, sometimes, I think we're like, there's a way in which like we're always supposed to like make it okay. And like, yes, that's important, but also there's a way where we can just be like, this just is what it is right now. And how can I like own that and still find like goodness in that? So we're gonna talk about that too, but just want to like give a little caveat there. So I'll tell you like a very, very, very condensed version. And then I want to like talk about all the things that had to shift, right? But like basically at the outset, or when I started like thinking about breastfeeding, I was like, oh, I'll breastfeed, but like whatever. I felt so neutral about it. Like I even brought like my preferred kind of formula with me to the hospital because I was like, oh, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like I felt super neutral about it, like my whole pregnancy. But then once you like give birth to your child, like it's interesting how that mentality changes and how you're like, must make this work at all costs, like want to do everything I can. Like it was really funny to watch that shift inside myself of like, don't care, all of a sudden care like 150%. And so Bennett, when we were still in the hospital, was like at risk for jaundice. So, and was not breastfeeding well. He was like definitely struggling to latch and everything. And so in the hospital, they were like, hey, we really need you to supplement. And so we did. We were still breastfeeding and we were supplementing with formula. So we basically started that from like the beginning. But the plan was kind of always to like do that to get him through that like risk phase for jaundice and then go to exclusively breastfeeding. But my supply just never caught up. Totally get the shift. Yeah, thank you, Diane. So yeah, so my supply just like never caught up. I promise this will get interesting in a second, but just trying to like context this for someone who's probably never breastfeed. They're like, who the actual fuck cares? But I promise points are coming. So basically I was just like underperforming. So I started to try to do all the things, right? I did like literally if there was a thing that told you it would help you produce more milk, they have my money right now. Like they have so many of my dollars, like anything. Like Kenny basically had to stage an intervention at one point and was like, I don't know why you're scrolling in the middle of the night, but like you cannot keep ordering all of these things. Like this is a lot and you have to stop. But I was trying everything, like every way I could pump, every product I could try, everything that I like read an old wives' tale on, whatever it was, I was like I'll try it, I'll test it, I'll figure it out. And I like went hard at that. Michelle said good parallel for infertility too. Oh my God, totally. So like, but again, good parallel for business. Isn't that what a lot of us do in business is like when we're underperforming, we're like, every single thing that shows up on your feed or in your awareness that says, if you do this, like you will get this result. You're like, oh, great. Here's my credit card. Here's my time. Here's my energy. Here's my attention. Like anything that feels like the fix we're willing to do. Right. Yeah, Jess said, oh my gosh, the midnight shopping binges where you're like, oh, this will change it all. Exactly. And that was what I was like desiring and craving so bad. Like that one thing that was going to be like, oh, my supply shot through the roof, right? Which is like laughable in retrospect that I thought like, whatever, like one fucking cookie or something like that, was going to like make me produce 12 ounces more of milk. Like, no, it wasn't, but at the time I was like, so invested in that. And I wanted that to be true so bad. And I was pretty much willing to do like just about anything. Like, I think if somebody had been like, there's this illegal drug that we can get for you, like, and it's $1,000. Do you want it? I would have been like, yes. How do I Venmo you? Like, that's how deep I was down the rabbit hole. And so just saying that because I think that this is what happens in business. Yes, everyone's saying so true. Shantae said yes. Patricia said, oh my God, so true. Michelle said yes. That's how so many of us end up with a million courses and coaches we don't need. Exactly. Michelle said this is such a type A overachiever mentality of like, if I just work hard, I'll get the result I want, but it usually leads to burnout 1000%. And like Jess said too, that's literally how they market it. Eat the cookie and then they show side-by-side bottles, like 1000%. You're right. But like it really is the marketing is so compelling too, right? Just like in our space where it's like, oh, I just changed this one thing and everything changed. Really though, that's like never the story. You know what I mean? But like, it's just easy to get so invested in that. And so like kind of in the dream of it, honestly, like I was almost like in this parallel universe of being like, I will fix this. Like Michelle said, total type A overachiever. Obviously I was postpartum and insanely hormonal. So like love and grace to me and all of that. Right. But like the marketing was so good. I was so far down the rabbit hole and I wanted the result so bad, right? And like, this is almost like the trifecta that happens in our space that makes people, like Michelle said, completely overinvest, have all these things they don't need, make all these purchases that like aren't the thing, right? Great marketing, huge desire, right? And like a willingness to try whatever that like type A overachiever mentality, right? So anyway, that's where I was for a while. And just like underperforming at something that I probably like, I've never worked that hard at something, I will say, that I was that bad at, if that makes sense, right? Like I mean, like pumping like 10 times a day, power pumping, like all the things, like I was just working so hard at it. And not really getting anywhere, like, I mean, maybe some stuff would take it up like this much, but like not in any real significant way. Hannah said, and it also doesn't help when you see sources and people say things like, cool, your kid will never learn to walk or go to college or have friends because you didn't breastfeed, or in business, you'll never be successful if you don't exercise. It's so true, right? Michelle said, and then on top of all the shame spiral about our debt, so then we try to solve it by solving our money mindset. It's a never ending vicious cycle. Oh my God, Michelle, so true. Just said, oh God, the power pumping, my nipples hurt just thinking about it, right? Seriously. Katie said, I've been unlearning this for the past 2 years. You've been so instrumental in that. Oh, thank you. Right. But like Hannah said too, it's like, there's like a lot of like shame associated with it. And I think that shame happens in our industry too, where like obviously in the breastfeeding world, it's like, oh, and I didn't even mention this. I totally forgot this until this moment. The formula shortage was happening then too. So there was like especially a ton of like online noise and shaming about like, why wouldn't mothers just breastfeed? Like, why is this even a problem? Da, da, da. And I'm like, right? But there was just like all this extra noise about like why breastfeeding is so much better and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, so intense. And again, it's the same thing in our space. It's almost like we've equated this thing to like results equals good person, results equals healed person, more money equals like best person or whatever, right? And like the most milk equals the best mom. Like that's like, it's so fucked when you say it out loud like that, but it's so what happens, and it's what like happens in online marketing, no matter what the kind of marketing is. The other thing that's crazy that I just want to name for a second is that like I was just down the Instagram rabbit hole, because like once you start clicking and buying, it's never ending what it will show you, right? And I think the same thing happens in our space too, is like once you've bought like whatever, like the Instagram course from the fucking ad or whatever, like you're just pushed that content all the time. And so it almost feels like that's the world you live in. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you're literally in the creation of your own like universe, and that's all you're seeing all day. So like all I was seeing all day was this stuff, right? The formula shortage really did bring out the trolls, Michelle. Yeah, it's so true. Diane said, I pushed myself so hard while trying to breastfeed my first son. I got so sick and had to stop. The drive and pressure was so intense. Oh, Diane, I'm so sorry. Michelle said, and the hardest part is that people carry this guilt and shame for years because so many will never process it and talk about it. Totally. Yes, Jess said that narrative, if you heal yourself, you'll make more money, is like, ooh, yeah, right. Like, can that help on your journey? Yes. Does more money equal healed person? Not in any way, shape, or form. Let's call it what it is, right? So anyway, I was like in this like self-created Instagram rabbit hole. And so just wanting to name that too, because it's really easy to find ourselves there in business and be like, this is what's real and true. And it's like, no, this is like the algorithm creating this like universe in which you live, and like having to be aware of that is so important. Okay, and then this other thing happened that was so interesting. So we had gotten like a chest freezer, you know, like one of those big freezer things for the garage. Because like I just assumed I would breastfeed, and like this is a whole other live stream, but I learned like approximately nothing before I gave birth, like really intentionally. Like that was my personal desire and way that I went through this process. Like I didn't take a birth class, a breastfeeding class, nothing. Like I went in very blind on purpose, and that felt like the best to me. But I just like assumed, like I didn't even know you would like have all of these issues breastfeeding. So I was just like, oh yeah, like we should have a freezer to like put milk in. So we had one of those, but I wasn't even producing enough milk to give Bennett every day. Like we were half and half with formula and breast milk. And so obviously I wasn't freezing any. And we had a hurricane here, and one of my very, very good friends, she had her daughter 3 days before Bennett. So we've like very much been on this journey together, and they had to evacuate for the hurricane. And she's also breastfeeding and had like a huge stash of milk. And so we offered her our chest freezer for when they evacuated. We offered to like hold all of her milk, because didn't need mine. And that was such an interesting thing to kind of have to process through too, is like having that like so in your face of being like, oh, like mine isn't filling this up no matter how hard I'm trying, but like here's someone else that like is, and that is performing how they're supposed to, and like finding the like piece / comparison in that. So that was just like one other thing I wanted to note, because again, I think that's what we do in the online space, right? Like excuse me, our friend that we started with is getting X results, and so how dare we not? Or like one of the people that we were in a group program with is now doing X and saying they're making Y. Like, what's wrong with us? You know what I mean? And so just wanting to name that too, like it's so interesting how we find these ways to make ourselves wrong, and just like how we can have experiences that like really can reinforce that if we want it to. But I think the online space is like really built to reinforce that. Lindsay said, as someone who's on the other side of this, there are a lot of parallels to playing smaller, not showing up or being in your power, and celebrating what you've created and your success. It really feels like as a new mom, you can't win either way, which is why the mindset you have is so, so important. Totally. just also love that you're having this conversation because I feel like these stories are so helpful to see what this process actually looks like versus everyone has 3 freezers full of milk, so I'm a failure. Exactly, right? Like it's okay that my friend did, and like it's like that doesn't have to be the normalization. So I'm going to talk about like all the shifts I went through, but like just wanted to kind of like set the stage that that's sort of what we were dealing with, and that's what I think like happens in business so often. And I said I had a lot of not enoughness with the twins because I couldn't produce enough for both of them, not enough milk, not enough one-on-one attention for each. I also couldn't keep up with the baby books, photos, and so on. But like in business, what matters is that I showed up the best I could consistently. And I have 2 really happy, thriving 3-year-olds. Yes. And a business I love totally. I also think that whatever our thing is shows up in that. Like, right. So my thing is always control, you know, and so it totally showed up in like, how can I control this? Like, I can control how many times I pump a day. So I will pump the most times per day. Like I can control how many cookies I have delivered to my house. I can control how many different supplements I try. Like I really was like in a, like, how can I like make this happen way? And it's so funny because I've done so much work on that in business and personally. And it's just funny how sometimes we don't see it showing up or we don't want to see it showing up. And so for me, it was like very fucking obvious that it was showing up, but I was just like, no, I just like need to feed my child, right? Yeah, I'm glad you like the voice. Maybe I'll record a podcast too, Michelle. Sounds good, Shari. Thank you. Oh, control freak, right? Like our stuff just shows up, and so I think it also like it's easy to kind of write it off as like, oh no, but this time it's real. Like this time it's about making money for my family, so it matters. This time it's about feeding my child, so it's okay. And the truth is like it's always a pattern, you know? So that was something I like really had to wake up to. So after I had bought, you know, like the 1,000th supplement or whatever, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm getting really deep into this in a way that's like not helpful at all. And so I really was like, okay, what's happening here? And like, luckily had the awareness to kind of like pull myself out of it. Luckily had Kenny to kind of be like, no, this is like too much. You are not like stop kind of thing. And then, so went through like a lot of shifts related to that. So I'll talk about this in a second, but yes, exactly, Michelle. No, this is different. Always. Haley. All right. So first thing I had to shift was realizing I was still accomplishing my goals, right? So I think that this is what we have to see in business sometimes too, is like my goal was to breastfeed Bennett, get him some breast milk that I thought, you know, would be good for him. Check fucking check. You know what I mean? Like the goal was literally happening. And I was like over here spiraling while accomplishing the goal, you know? So I think like we do that in business too. It's like sometimes our goal is to just like, whatever, hit 5K months and we're literally doing it. And then we're making ourselves so wrong because someone else is doing more or because there's this perception that we should be doing better or more or different. And so when I could just level set with myself and be like, I am literally doing what I set out to do. I'm literally doing the exact thing that I want to do. Why am I making this so wrong? Why does this have to be such a problem? And the truth is, it doesn't have to be a problem, right? Like he's getting exactly what he needs. Thank you, Alyssa. Hey, Morgana. So relatable. I was over here spiraling while accomplishing the goal. Exactly. And it's so interesting because basically, I'm going to try to make this part of the story very short, but as y'all know, my dad was really ill at the time. And so that was like a lot too. But there was one day where I spent a lot of the day at the hospital with my dad, and Kenny had Bennett. And so I had been pumping while I was at the hospital, but Kenny had to give Bennett 1 bottle of only formula. And he ended up getting a fever that night, and we had to take him to the emergency room because he was still so little. And we found out he had COVID. And very long story short, the doctor was like, it's so interesting that that's when he spiked a fever. He might have had COVID for multiple days, but the one time he like didn't get the antibodies in breast milk is when he spiked a fever. So like, you're doing great, mama, like keep up the good work. Like he obviously was getting what he needed. And that was like so helpful for me and really so encouraging. To be like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter that he was getting whatever, 12 ounces instead of 24 or whatever. What mattered is that like what he needed was in there. And so it was like, still accomplishing the goal. Like that was my takeaway from that. Again, so it's like I was still accomplishing the goal while flipping the fuck out, spending all this money, all this energy, being like, I'm not accomplishing the goal. But I was, right? Yes, thank you, Diane. Right, Michelle, it's so true. We tell ourselves so many stories of it doesn't count unless blank. And I feel like we talked about this so much my season. And literally, I would have a client but be like, it doesn't count because my one isn't sold out. Exactly. Right. Like it's so crazy making. And so I think that that's so true in business, especially in our industry, as like results just get bigger and bigger and more like inflated to a certain extent, where it's like, you might have started your business with like this one goal in mind, and then you get kind of like deep into the Instagram rabbit holes of our industry. And then you decide like the only goal is $1 million a month or bust. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, you might be like literally accomplishing the goal, making yourself super wrong about that. And so just like wanting to name that, like for me, like that now I'm 10 and a half months in. Right. And I feel like I have fully accomplished the goal. Like we'll probably make it to a year. I don't know. My supplies have been going down quite a bit since I was sick and stuff, but like probably make it to a year. I'm just pumping now because he's basically like, I don't know, a few weeks ago was pretty much like, I don't breastfeed anymore, mom. LOL. Totally weaned him down in like a day. It's fine. But like I'll probably make pumping to a year or so. Like I have more than accomplished the goal. You know what I mean? But like it's just so helpful to like be at that perspective to be able to name that. And so I just want to extend that permission is like, could you just name that you've accomplished the goal? And maybe you'd like to do more, or maybe you want something else, but like really being able to sink in and let yourself own that, I think is so important. Another thing that I really had to do is like see it as a worthwhile endeavor, even though it didn't look the same as others. So like, again, the like COVID thing helped with that because I was like, wow, this is such a worthwhile undertaking, even though it doesn't look like a freezer full of milk, or even though that cookie didn't make my bottle go from this to this or whatever, right? Like this is still such a worthwhile endeavor. And I think we have to do that in business too, right? Like, okay, maybe I'm not reaching 100,000 people or something, but like, can it still be a really worthwhile endeavor, right? Like, yes, right? Like, did you change 3 of your clients' lives? You know what I mean? Like that can be everything, right? So just like wanting to name that too, of like, just because it doesn't look like X, like, can it still be such a worthwhile undertaking? And like, really trying to find that for yourself and give yourself that permission. For me, that was really that, like, this still feels like the most worthwhile undertaking, even though it looks really different, or even though like it doesn't look like X result kind of thing, right? Michelle said, and I've been making people feel less alone from day one, goal accomplished. Exactly, right? Like, can you take in the goal? Can you be like, yes, done, this is worthwhile, and doing things that matter? Like the idea that it always has to be like, and it's $1 million a month and impacting 100,000 people, like that doesn't equal better necessarily, right? Like, is Bennett going to have a different, better childhood or life experience because I pumped more milk or not? Probably not, right? Like it doesn't have to be a thing. Like, are you going to be like granted a gold star because you helped 100,000 people instead of 100? Probably not, So like letting ourselves take that in and not getting so sucked into the hype is so important. Another thing was just like being my own biggest cheerleader. This has been one of my favorite combos in a long time. Let's have more sexy voice. Yes. I will work on this, Michelle. We'll try to retain this voice. Hey, Lucy. Okay, so another one was, like being my own biggest cheerleader. I really, like at a certain point, was looking for like, that validation of like look at how much, like, I remember one morning I like pumped more than I ever did and just like sobbing because I was so happy about it. And then it was like, but so what? Like that, I can't only feel this excited about it when that happens. And so I like really started to be like, I need to be my own biggest cheerleader. So like every time I pump, I'm like, yes, go me. I'm so proud of myself. Kenny is probably so sick of hearing this, but now at like 10 and a half months, almost like every day, I'll be like, isn't it so cool? I made it to like 10 and a half months breastfeeding. He's like, yeah, it's cool. Just like it was, 20 minutes ago when I said it was cool. Right. But like, I really have tried to lean into how can I be my own biggest cheerleader here as opposed to expecting external results to give me that feeling or give me that thing, right? Like I'm the one who gets to control that. And so I think in business, we have to do that too. We're so often waiting for like the monthly income to tell us that, or the client or the whatever, but like, what does it look like to be your own biggest cheerleader on your journey? Like, can that change everything? For me, that was probably like the biggest switch flip when I was like, I am going to be so fucking proud of myself and cheer myself on so much because like no one else is gonna get it. Like I remember one time my mom came over and was like helping with Bennett and stuff and like grabbed a bottle and she was like, oh, that's all that's in it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like so fucking proud of that. Like I had to keep finding that even when like that wasn't external or someone else wasn't saying to me like, oh my God, it's so awesome that you pumped that. Like I had to be like, it is awesome. And that's how we're going to talk about it now, Kate said it's so helpful thinking about the present situation, preparing to launch a book and getting big results, but trying to reframe around the results that actually matter to me, like people who feel seen, helped, or opportunities that come from having it in the world. I love that, Kate. So good. Michelle, yes. Yes, our own biggest cheerleader, exactly. And being proud of ourselves. Yeah, like it really is so interesting how like we don't give ourselves permission for that much. And as soon as I started doing that, I was like, oh, this is like game changing, And it's funny because I've always done that really well in business, almost like more naturally, I would say. And so finding a way to do it really intentionally here when it wasn't coming naturally was very, very helpful. Another thing that I really had to recognize that I think is a super important conversation in the online space is I had to recognize that I just have a different reality from many mothers who are breastfeeding. And what I mean by that is probably like a year before I got pregnant, almost exactly a year before I got pregnant, I had my breast implants removed. And one of them had ruptured and was excuse me, was silicone. And so it like trying to think of like a non-graphic way to say this, but like there was a lot of cleaning that had to happen. So there was like a lot of trauma to my breast because I had the implants removed and because there was rupture. And so the reality is like I just had a different situation and different starting point than a lot of other moms breastfeeding. Like no matter what I was going to try, like there was probably only a certain point I was ever going to get to no matter what. Does that make sense? And part of me like wanted to fight that so much because the truth is like that's super frustrating in a sense because that was like a self-created choice to get breast implants and like have, like done harm or trauma to my body in that way. And I had to like live with the kind of like decision of that. And so like, yes, that was sort of hard to take in, but it was also really helpful to take in to just be like, this just looks different for me than it does for someone else. And how can I own that? I have so much to say about that, but I don't know your comments. Yes, exactly, Lucy. Yes. So hard to anchor into it really can be. Michelle said, we look for external reflection, but when we don't get it, we stop versus when we start being our own cheerleaders, we start getting the external validation too. It's so true. It is counterintuitive, but it does happen that way. Yeah. So I think like the thing about like realizing I was at a different point, I think like this applies so much to our space. Like just some examples. I mean, there are probably a million of them, but it's like, maybe you only have 10 hours a week to work on your business and you're comparing it to someone who has 40, right? Or like, here's a good one. Yes, I run my business with a very small child, but I did not start my business with a very small child. So like, you could be comparing to me and being like, oh my gosh, like, why am I not here? But like, I had whatever, 6, I guess, 6 years of running this business before I had a small child as part of the, life equation. So like, be really careful in comparing apples to apples and trying to make it look a certain way. And obviously time is just one example of that. But like, like there are always kind of realities of what we're dealing with that maybe look, feel, are very different than the realities of what someone else is dealing with, right? Like, this is a whole conversation that could go so much deeper than that too, in terms of like equity, privilege, all of those things, right? But the point is, as soon as I realized that like my starting point was just different, and even if that was self-created, like that's okay, but I have to kind of like take that in and be willing to own that, was really, really helpful. And kind of giving myself a little bit of permission for it to look different. Like, yes, like I'm not necessarily missing a secret or like need more fucking cookies or supplements. Like, what is real is that I have like real limitations. Like maybe it's someone that has an autoimmune disease and is trying to run their business or whatever, right? But I have real limitations, and like working within those as opposed to fighting those can be such a gift, right? Because then again, you can get back to the place of like, I'm so proud of myself. I'm doing so well on this journey. I'm accomplishing my personal goal, versus like, it should look different or better. Why doesn't it? Like that is such a mind fuck. And it's just unwinnable, And so wanting to like really give that reframe to like, maybe your situation is just totally, totally different than all of the people that you're comparing yourself to. And if you could own that, even if it was a choice, even if it was self-created, like mine was, like, how much freedom could there be in that, Hannah said it's crazy how much grief we give ourselves when we're not at the same starting point as others. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, it's just so helpful to note that. And I think, it doesn't mean that it has to be bad necessarily, but it does have to be like acknowledged, right? Hey, Lisa, thank you for being here. Another thing that I want to say on this too, that I think is so relevant to the online space, is another thing that I was doing was getting some different consults with some lactation specialists. Everyone had different advice for me. Like, literally every person I saw, like one person was like, it's not a thing, like you're fine. One person was like, stop giving formula, just breastfeed and your supply will catch up. Another person was like, maybe he has a tongue tie. Another, like, I go on and on, right? But like, it was so vast and so varied. And like, even Kenny like came to a couple of appointments with me and he was like, this is fucked. Like, they're all giving you like completely polar opposite advice, like so confusing. And I think that, again, this is like what happens in the online space too, right? It's like, we're like, okay, like I'll just get someone to help me and fix this. And then we do, and we get like massively differing advice and feel insane and feel like then we can't win. Because it's like, if we do this, this person thinks we're wrong. If we do this, this person thinks we're wrong. Like, it backs you into such a corner. And so like, again, I think that it's sort of like, how can you be your own biggest cheerleader? How can you recognize where you're starting from? How can you listen to your gut? How can you do what feels best for you? Like, these are so important in life and business and all of the things, because if not, you will make yourself insane. And I just want to say that because I really did make myself insane for part of this journey. And I just feel very grateful that I have not done that to myself very often in business, but I can see how easy it is for other people to do that. And I think we just need to be like saying that more. Like, are you making yourself crazy? Like, is that like, can we ask each other that, right? Yeah, exactly. Diane was so crazy making Kenny's take. I know Kenny's like the one that's like, this is not a big deal. Michelle said, so fascinating to hear that everyone's advice was competing. Really curious if any of the folks you talked to brought you back to you, because I think that is the underlying thing here in all this. No. And they were all great, but like, yeah, it's that, no. They were all like, sure. Do you know what I mean? That's another thing that happens in the online space is like everyone is fucking sure of their opinion, their take, their whatever. And it's like that was kind of my experience in all of this. And like everyone was positive and spoke with a lot of authority and sureness, which is part of what was crazy making, because it was like, well, you can't all be right because you're all contradicting each other. So like, right. And again, same thing in the online space. Like in some ways, everyone's right because like it all works. And in some ways it's massively confusing because no one is right, you know, because they don't know what actually works for you. What else did I want to say there? Yeah, just wanting to like, you know, make that parallel for me when I was kind of like, okay, I just have to stop listening to like everyone and like backing myself into these contradictory corners. And I need to just like do what feels best to me and Bennett. Like things really got easier. Like there was a point where Kenny had started traveling for work again. And so it was kind of a lot to be pumping as much as I was while taking care of him and stuff. Because normally like if I would pump that many times, like Kenny would take him here or there, you know? So it was easier. And when he started traveling, there was one point where we were just like, maybe I just need to like stop breastfeeding. And as soon as I was like, maybe I'll just stop and like let go of the pressure, like it started to get so much easier from there. But it was like, as soon as I turned that gauge down and gave myself permission and like, wasn't like, there's a right way and it has to be this and it has to look like this and whatever, it was like amazing how different it felt. I feel you. Once we hear all the advice, we have to sift through and do what's right for us. Exactly, Lisa. So true. Just that, oh man, there's such a big difference between support and advice. And I feel like that happens in biz too. Yes, 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 yes. Right. And we also have to know what we're asking for too. Like, I think that, you know, that was probably partially my fault too, because I think I was going there being like, I want advice. And maybe what I really needed was support, you know? And so that's like a place in business too, where I feel like most of us in business are like, oh no, I want advice, tell me what to do, like kind of thing. But what most of us are craving and going to flourish in the most is actually support. So yeah, that was sort of it. And again, like, I think it's just really interesting to be like, I've really never worked so hard at anything that I've been so underperforming at. Like the fact that this has taken up like God hours of my day for 10 and a half months. And it's something that like I'm technically very like underperforming at is interesting. And it's been such a gift to myself to be able to stay in that and not quit because I wasn't like doing it right. And I think that's the same in business. Like, I think so many people quit because they're not doing it right, but like really it was going right. And really it was working well for like them and what they wanted. It's just easy to lose track of that. I feel I learned this in motherhood years ago. Now I'm trying to learn it in biz too. So grateful for you, Lisa. Love that thing. And so good. I feel like it's so easy when you're down the rabbit hole to think what we want is the advice. Exactly. It's that finding the secret strategy piece. Yes, advice. And in the context of support is really the best. Totally agree, Jeff. But yeah, like, you know, permission to like do the thing that like you're not getting the same results as everyone else and still to be like happy with that and okay with that and like keep doing something even if it's not perfect. Like I think so many people quit in business because they're not making 100K months in a year or two or something. And really like could have had an amazing business that like actually did hit their goals and actually did support their family and actually did give them so much, but because they feel like they're not here, like something's wrong with them. I actually saw this post the other day. I'm not going to like say too much about it because I really don't vibe with like calling specific people out, but it made me ragey. And I don't like really get ragey very often, although I have been quite ragey about the online space lately. I told one of my clients it's my rage era, but it was basically about like the gist of the post was, I'm trying to think of how to say it without, you know, like being specific again, but it was basically like, don't hire me unless you want like, like don't, okay, I'm just gonna make up a thing that's like it's tangential, but again, like I don't like my vibe does not call a specific person out, but it was basically like, don't hire me unless you want to make $1 million months. and almost like, how fucking dare you? And I was like, God, this is the problem, right? Like it'd almost be like a lactation consultant being like, don't work with me unless your only goal is to have a freezer full of breast milk. I'm like, that, like my goal was just to be like, am I doing everything I can? Like, could I get this much more, you know? And so like this idea that like it's shamey, bad, wrong, how dare you vibes around like not wanting these massive, massive, massive results or not expecting that of yourself. So interesting, right? Like, so not what is actually helpful to most of us. Most of us don't ever get into business wanting that. And I'm not saying it's bad to want that necessarily, but I am saying that like the idea that you're a better person or more worthy or more deserving of someone's time and attention because you want that, like I just feel like I do not understand that. And I think it's so harmful. So anyway, I don't know what made me say that. What was I talking about? Maybe I'm just like that ragey that it's still on my mind. Yeah, how dare you vibe such a turn off? Exactly. Shari, you had a question that I just missed, but I saw it was about like, I think you were saying like what made me like keep doing half and half instead of switching to formula. Is that right? Or am I like making that up? Tell me if that was right. And I'm happy to answer that. Such a good reminder of how we all want different things and none of it's right. And that all or nothing thinking is actually super harmful for most of us because it leaves us in that not enough space. Exactly. Like, that's kind of the point is like, you're allowed to want what you want. And then ideally support is there to help you get that. But like the idea that it's only good enough if you want a certain thing. Oh, that's why I was talking about it, because I was saying that like, I think so many people are so close to accomplishing like their actual goals, not the goal that the industry is making up for them. And they're like right there. And if they would just let themselves like want what they want, like it would be amazing what a like beautiful business they could run. But because there's so much pressure associated with it and there's so much not enoughness if you don't want this certain thing or do it my way, or this idea that like, right, like more money equals better person, whatever, like that is where it gets so toxic. And I think that's what makes a lot of people bow out. And so, yeah, I think just wanting to name that, which brings up a great question, which Shari asked, which is like, why did I keep breastfeeding instead of just fully switching to formula? I mean, I think there was a few things there. One is that part of it was just like something that I felt really connected to and enjoyed in many ways. Like obviously I don't love pumping all the time, but I really did like enjoy the process of breastfeeding. It felt like really connected to Bennett in that and really like loved being able to like have that time together in that way. Another reason was like after the COVID incident that I mentioned where like he spiked the fever and stuff, like, do I think that like that's necessarily true? No, but like when the doctor said that, I was like, well, that makes sense. And it really made me feel like what he was getting from the breast milk was super helpful for him. And so that like reinvigorated me or motivated me to be like, you know what, that feels like it's worth it enough for me to keep doing it. And then also like, I just know that I'm like, we're one and done with Bennett. And so there was part of me that just really wanted to have this experience. Like, it was kind of interesting, like going into pregnancy, birth, motherhood, being like, knowing that we only wanted one, because it's really made me kind of like have different contexts and kind of want to be like, if this is the only time I get to experience this, what is my desire here? Like, what do I most want out of this experience? And so for me, it was like, if we're only gonna do this one time, like, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'll try with my next kid or whatever. It was kind of like, okay, this is the moment. Like, what do you want out of this? And for me, that I did want a longer breastfeeding journey. I did want the experience of like really having tried that fully. And so that felt really important to me. And then honestly, the third reason was, I think I shared this earlier, but like this was like right in the middle of the formula shortage too. And so just the idea of like stopping when that was at its height really freaked me out too. Like obviously we could have done it and it would have been fine, but that was for my postpartum brain, that was like what would have like brought up a little bit of anxiety to be like, okay, I'm letting go of this and we know there's a shortage over here. So it was like interesting timing with that too. Might have thought about that a little bit different if that hadn't been at play, but I was already kind of like quite like on edge about like, are we gonna find it, have enough, all of those things. And so the idea of meeting it fully like really did freak me out a little. That's also why I kept breastfeeding when I was supplementing formula with meal. Yes, Michelle. I was also like, how can we connect, get you antibodies and nutrients and things, but also have me pump the least, right? Yeah, totally. So yeah, like that's pretty much it. The one other thing I wanted to add on the end of that is like one other thing that I think is interesting is like sometimes benefits come out of this that you don't even know. Like for me, one of the benefits of us supplementing and being half and half ended up being that like Kenny was actually able to help like probably a lot more than he probably would have been able to if Bennett was exclusively breastfed. So like, you know, if he like when my dad was sick and stuff and I needed to be away for longer periods of time, like I was able to. And I think it would have been really, really, really hard for me to make that decision almost. I already felt very pulled a lot of the time between like, am I with my dad at the hospital? Am I with my new baby? Like I felt a tremendous amount of kind of like conflict over that internally. And I think had I not been supplementing, the decision to supplement so that I could balance those would have been really, really, really tough for me. And so I think it's interesting how sometimes things work out just as they're meant to. Like I really feel like that was a gift that worked out exactly as it was meant to for me, because I think it was what I needed at the time, even though it wasn't what I wanted. Like I really think looking back, that was exactly what I needed to get through that time in my life. And so I just wanted to name that too, because I think that sometimes that's what happens in business too. Like we think we want all of these things and all of this followers and attention and this and that. And it's like sometimes like we need the exact opposite of that at a certain time in life, or sometimes we need like a certain situation to show up in business that maybe isn't what we want, but is serving us the most then. And so that was just my experience with this. When I look back, I'm like, man, like if that had played out any other way, I think that would have been quite tough on me. And the fact that that was like one decision in the midst of like a very difficult time that got taken off my plate and that I didn't have to like personally make really, really, really supported me. And so I think sometimes there are things showing up and helping us in ways that like we can't even know when we're underperforming. Like, you know, is that maybe the exact thing that we need at that moment? And so just wanting to name that too, like maybe the fact that your business is, you know, making 100K a year instead of 100K a month, like is exactly what you need right now. And could you honor that in yourself? Like, is there a gift in that for you that you need to kind of like go within and quiet yourself enough to see and acknowledge? Like for me, that was that. Like it was hard to see at the time, but like as I started to come out of that stress and started to like look back, I was like, oh my God, like that was for me, like that I needed. And so that was really cool in retrospect to see too. And so just wanting to name that inquiry, like if this is something you're thinking in business or feeling in business, like where is that maybe for you? And it doesn't always have to be, but again, that was my experience of it. Michelle said, having a second child gave me so much perspective on the breastfeeding journey because I have a different experience with both girls, but haven't really done anything differently. I think that's why it's so nice to have some of this behind the scenes in business too, because you get to see what's really going on versus just having one narrative of that. And it's really hard when we only compare to one narrative. It's like there's not enough data there, but our brains are like, oh no, this is it. And it looks all the way as I'm missing the mark. Yes, totally get that, Michelle. And I think exactly true. Like you can do the same thing and have a different experience entirely. And sometimes like that there's nothing else you can do about that, right? Thank you, Diane. So that is that. Like it's easy to make ourselves crazy. It's easy to spend all the money, buy all the things, look for the magic secret, go down every Instagram rabbit hole imaginable. But at the end of the day, probably one thing isn't going to change everything, right? Probably there is some acknowledgement in being where you're at, wanting what you want, you know, like having the things that serve you and like really getting to acknowledge if you're already accomplishing the goal. And like okay, so maybe you'll always run a business that's underperforming someone else. My business is always underperforming someone else. You know what my business underperforming many of my clients' businesses, technically, if you're just looking at finance or if you're just looking at revenue, right? Can that be okay? Can you still give yourself credit? Can you be your own biggest cheerleader? Like, I just think these lessons are so important and like just not talked about enough. So that is that. Thank you for listening to my breastfeeding saga. Very, very happy to still be in it and doing it in a way that feels good now and not being so stressed by it constantly. And just like knowing that that's possible in business too, right? Great example of the same thing in different experience, 2 different IG accounts. Yeah, right. Exactly, Michelle. So true. Cool. All right, guys, that's all I got for today. If you commented, just know you're entered to win Millionaire. I really appreciate you guys being here. Again, I don't always do like the personal share thing so much, but I really, really appreciate you listening to my story and my experience here. I hope it serves you. This is a lot of permission and reminder in business too. And I love you guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.